and welcome to another lawnfawn video. Today we are so excited to be introducing our brand new set, So Very Mice, and its coordinating dies. So let's go ahead and check it out. Our cute mice are back, and now they are sewing and embroidering. And first up, we have this little mouse that's embroidering into his hoop. And then this little guy is showing off his finished project. And then we have some items that you can stamp in the hoop that it looks like they are stitching them. So we have a heart, and then we have a flower that's in 3 parts so that you could stamp it in 3 different colors. And I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. We also have some things that you can stamp that are almost like projects that are partially created. And so we have this cute little kind of like trio of leaves, and we also have a little stitched line that it's going to appear in just a little bit. I ended up stamping it just a little bit later. Here we have this cute little mouse, and he can be holding this needle and thread, which just looks adorable. And then next up we have my very favorite mouse, which is this little guy with the thimble on his head. He is just too sweet. This guy is really cute because he can hold a ton of objects, and we have a bunch of accessories in this set. We have this beautiful dress on dress form and some scissors and a spool of ribbon. We also have some thread and buttons, which are really fun to have that mice hold or to just scatter around your scenes. We have this cute little flower that you can use to decorate or even put it kind of as if it's in the mouse's hair. And then you have this sweet little heart as well. We have some phrases that are perfect for fitting inside of the embroidery hoop. They're also just great small sentiments for cards as well. And so we have a happy birthday. Oh, and then I forgot, we have a little bow tie or bow there that you can use. We also have a thinking of you. And then we have thanks. And also hello. And some cute little smiley faces that you could add into those cute hoops, and some rosy cheeks that you can add to the smiley faces too, and a tiny little smiley face as well. We also have some small little phrases that you can stamp around the mice, like hi or stitch or snip, which is really cute with the scissors. Then we have some great sentiments. So we have you are so amazing. And then we have some mix and match sentiments. So we have a you mean and also a thanks. You can use the thanks on its own or stamp thanks so much. And you can stamp you mean so much to me, which is so sweet. And I also love this I heart you so much. Next, we're going to add some color to these adorable images, and I'm going to start off with some E40 markers, and I like changing up the shades of my browns and grays for my mice, but the E40s are just so cute, and I'm just adding some shading right around the curves of his ears, underneath his chin, etc., and then just blending those out. And I'm going to go ahead and color this other little mice in the same way. So there you can see that I've laid down my dark marker, I'm going with my medium, and then I am blending it out with my lightest marker. I then like to go back in with my darkest marker and add a little bit more shadow, and you can see that really helps bring him to life, and then some little pink for his ears, nose, and rosy cheeks. I'm going to color the wood of the embroidery hoop, and then we're going to be coloring in the embroidery hoops themselves. And I went through all my markers to see what would kind of look like that fabric, and the YR markers looked really good. The really light E markers are also really good for that kind of fabric look. And so I'm just going to put that on there, and then I can just kind of blend it out with those lightest markers, and then let it have kind of like this opening in the center where we can stamp our sentiment or our image. Now for these mice, we're going to go ahead and use some E30 markers just to have different shades. And I really like having different shades of mice on my cards. It always looks so cute to have the variation. So for these two guys, we'll be using the E30s, and you'll see I blend dark to medium to light. And there you can see I love keeping it light right around kind of his nose and mouth. That way it looks like he's just a little brighter right around his face. And then we'll add some rosy cheeks, nose, and ears. And then I'm going to use some cool grays for the thimble. I really like cool grays for metals. It really makes it look like a shiny metal. I decided to go back to my favorite E40s here for this little mouse, and he is just looking too cute. Oh my goodness. I'll add a little bit more of my darkest marker. I'll use a really, really light brown for his belly, and then of course the pink. Now, I was inspired by Cinderella, of course, to color in this dress, and I love these blues. So I ended up using these blues for a bunch of the different images. That way, everything would kind of match together on my card. I'll use a little light gray there for the belt on the dress, and then those same colors that I use for the fabric, I'm going to use for the top of the dress form. I had to color in my scissors like a Fisker's scissors, so I added the orange for the top, and then some grays down for the metal part of the scissors, and then here I'm bringing back those blue colors for all of my elements so that it all coordinates for the ribbon, the button, the flower, the thread, and I think it just looks so cute to have all of the pieces match. I'm going to bring the same markers that I used for the wooden part of the hoops, we're going to use for the spools on the ribbon. And then there is that other little stitch piece that I was telling you about that makes it look like this little guy is in process of stitching a beautiful work of art. And now I wanted to show you some of the embroidery pieces in action. So this is that 3-step flower. We're going to stamp in some pink ink, then we can stamp in some yellow for the center of the flower and some green for the leaves. And it looks like you were changing out your thread and creating this really beautiful embroidered project. The other thing that you can do with these embroidery hoops is that you can use those different phrases. We had thinking of you and hello, happy birthday, etc. And what looks really nice with these is stamping some of those stitched elements around those phrases so that it looks like almost like a little cross-stitched pillow or something that somebody is working on. And so here you can kind of see how to build those items up. And then here is a look at what it looks like inside the different embroidery hoops and just how cute it is. So right now we're going to stamp that sweet little heart right there in the center, and I just love that so much. And then at the bottom, you can see what it's like to stamp one of the phrases. So here we have the happy birthday, and then we're going to use some of those little stitch details on the top and bottom to kind of help integrate it into this whole stitching theme. And doesn't it really look like one of those like little embroidered pillows or different things like that? I think it's just so sweet. And then here is the guy who is in process of embroidering his beautiful project, and you can stamp the different items with that. And here is that one little line, and if you stamp that, especially in different colors of ink, it looks like he is about to stitch that heart that you can see in the other Mouse's finished project. So it's just so much fun to play around with these. And here are the coordinating dies for the set, which you can bend apart at the tabs or use your wire snips to separate. We can take those coordinating dies and line them up with our stamped images and then hold them in place. We'll run it through the die cut machine and we will have perfectly cut out images every time. And here is a look at all of the images from this set. I love that there are so many different ways to mix and match the elements. And here you can take a look at that. So this little guy is my favorite. I like to lean him back and then layer a bunch of things on top so it looks like he's carrying a big heavy thing of sewing objects. This other little guy can hold on to the scissors and the needle and thread, and you can add the little bow into their hair too. And now it is time to start creating a card with this adorable set. And we're going to be using the peekaboo backdrop here. And we're going to be die cutting this from some white cardstock, and that's going to be our frame. And this is a recreation of a card by Callie, so thank you so much, Callie. And we are going to be using the brand new What's Sewing On paper for this. And the paper in this collection is so pretty, and we're going to use a different one in each one of those squares or rectangles. So I'm just taking out my ruler and measuring them so I know kind of exactly what size that I need to create my little pieces of pattern paper, and then I can start to trim them down. And the What's Sewing On paper is so beautiful. It looks as if it's been stitched. It's just so pretty. Some of the sides have just plain stitching details and some have flowers. And in this case, we're going to be using all of the flowers. I thought that would be a really pretty look with this cute scene of adorable little mice. So there you can see how these pieces are going to start layering behind the peekaboo backdrop. Oh, it's so pretty. I just love that paper so much. Next, I'm going to take out a standard size card base that's 5.5 by 4.25, and I went ahead and trimmed down 2 more of those pieces so that I have 2 rectangles and 2 squares that are the same size each. And I love how this looks, by the way. And now I want to kind of create a quilt of these papers on a card because I think it would just be gorgeous. But I'm just kind of seeing how these are going to look, what placement I want the little flowers to be in, and it's looking pretty good. I'm going to lay this over top to make sure it all lines up, and it does. So now I can start adding tape runner behind and layering all the pieces on there. And this is a really fun way to use up pattern paper scraps and create cute little scenes in each of those peekaboo backdrop windows. It's one of my favorite card designs because it's almost like you're making 4 little mini cards in each little square. The next step is to add some foam strips behind the peekaboo backdrop, and I love doing this because that little pop really makes it look like each of those are like a little shadow box almost. So I really like these foam strips for doing this. They're the perfect width, and so I'm just going to lay them across the peekaboo backdrop and just trim off any of the excess, and then we can remove the liner paper and layer it on top of our quilted squares. Now I'm going to take out the So Very My stamp set, and I went ahead and stamped, colored, and die cut a bunch of the images. I'm going to be adding foam squares behind pretty much everything because I love the pop in those windows, again for that shadow box feel. And then we're going to start layering these cute little scenes, and I just love this guy holding on to the thread. I think it's so sweet. And I went ahead and colored these different items looking at the colors of the paper. So we have some of that pinky, purple, and blue echoing the different squares all around, and that's going to bring all of the colors together. I had to use my blue Cinderella dress. I think it's just so pretty, and then I layered some of the elements there, and right now is when I realized, oh, I need to start stamping some of my stitched elements into these cute embroidery hoops. So I set everything up on acrylic blocks, and now I'm going to do some stamping. And on the guy that's there actually doing some embroidery, I'm going to use that little kind of leaf image as if he's starting to embroider that sweet little flower, and then on the finished project, I'm going to stamp the flower. So I'm going to stamp out this cute little pink flower, and then we'll do the yellow center and then the green stems, and I think this looks so pretty. And then I can keep working on the rest of the scenes. So we're going to add the cute little embroidery guy there up in the top, and then the one with the thimble who is so cute right next to him. I love this bottom square for displaying kind of like the finished project there. I think that's really cute. And now we're just going to add some fun little accessories. Once again, I colored them in the purple, like that pinky orange, blue, and yellow, so that you'll have a little bit of each color in each window, and I think that looks so pretty. We're going to add that little bow tie to him, which I think is super sweet. And then I think we just need one more button and all of our scenes are done. Now, for the sentiment here in this card, we're going to do something kind of fun that I've never done before that Callie had done on her card, and I thought was such a cute idea. So we're going to be doing some white heat embossing on some black cardstock. We'll prep the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and then stamp in some clear sticky ink. We can sprinkle on some white heat embossing powder and then heat it up with the heat tool to have a nice bright white shiny sentiment. And then what Callie did was she actually cut around the letters. So she fussy cut the whole sentiment. And because it's this beautiful cursive, there's a lot of little bumps and it gives it a really cool shape. So I'm just going to use my scissors and trim around. Now, when I finish this, I kind of wish I would have left a bigger border. And the next time I do this, I'm going to try that. But I thought this was a really cute way to present a sentiment that's a little bit different than using a banner like I normally do. I just thought it was really fun. So now that that's all trimmed out, we're going to add some tape runners to the back and we can layer the sentiment onto the card. And isn't this so cute? Pun intended. It's just adorable. These little mice are so much fun to play with. They would, of course, mix and match really well with our previous mice too. And I had such a blast making this card. And next up, Shari is going to wow you with two cards. You are going to love it. So take it away, Shari.
So on this card, I'm using the new So Very Mice, and I am going to combine it with another favorite set of mine, which is Sewn with Love. I'm going to use a couple of those images. They're a little bit bigger, but I think that they look super cute with the mice. I've already colored and cut out my images with all the coordinating dies, and I'm just going to set those aside. For my background, I'm pulling out the new What's Sewing On pattern paper pack, and I'll be pulling one of these out to be basically kind of the wallpaper of my little scene that I'm creating. I really like this blue one with the little lines. I think that it works really well because it's nice and subtle. So I've pulled that out and I am going to cut that to 4¼ by 5½ so it will fit on my card base perfectly. And then now I'm pulling out some of the white wood grain cardstock. And this is just a scrap piece that I have here. It's wide enough to do what I need to do. And I'm just going to trim this down into two little strips that are 1/8 of an inch wide. I'm just cutting that one off to get it nice and squared up because this was a scrap and I wasn't sure how wide it was. And then I'll cut two that are 1/8 of an inch. And these are going to become little shelves in my craft room that I'm creating on my card. I'm also using some of the stripes and sprinkles paper. This is going to be the base or the bottom, kind of the tabletop that goes at the bottom of my card. I really like these tone on tone dots. They really work well for kind of a solid with a little bit of pattern. Now I've pulled out my Moonstone ink. This ink really matches the blue of this paper pretty well. And I'm just going to add ink to the top edge and a little bit on the sides, creating sort of a vignette look with darker around the edges and lighter in the center. And you can see as I've added that ink in there, how that creates a really nice look and kind of defines those edges a little bit better. Now I'm going to add that polka dot paper that I pulled out to the bottom. That's why I did not ink the bottom edge. And I'm just lining this strip up with the bottom, and then I'll just cut off the excess piece that is hanging off the side. And this is going to act as sort of my desktop where my sewing machine and some of my other little images will sit. Now I'm going to add some adhesive all over the back of that panel and put it onto a card base. So now I have my background ready to start creating my little scene. So I've pulled out those two strips that I cut earlier. Those are my floating shelves up on the wall. I've got that sewing machine and that jar of buttons and the spool and the pincushion. Those are all from the Sewn with Love sets. You can see how they're much bigger than the mice, but I think that really makes it look like these mice are kind of working around in your craft room, and I just think that's really fun. So I've placed the major images kind of where I want them to be, and then I'm going to start gluing my pieces down. So I've started with my big piece, which is that sewing machine, and then I'm adding the spool and the thimble with some foam squares for some dimension in front of it. And I am going to add my little stitching detail so it looks like my mouse is stitching something on her embroidery hoop here. And I'm doing that before I add this with the foam to my card base. She's just going to set over here to the right of the sewing machine. And then for the little floating shelves, I'm using my strips of foam adhesive so that they pop up from the background as well and look like they're coming out from the wall. And this little strip works perfect because it's nice and thin and hides perfectly behind that shelf piece. And I'm just placing those overhanging the outside edge, and I'll just trim those off as well, the part that overhangs the edge. And before I start to add my images, I did want to make sure that I added my sentiment. And I'm using the scripty word "sew" from the Sewn with Love set. And it has a coordinating die, so I'll just cut that out. And this is going to be a fun way to where this word can overlap the images and also be on the background. So that's sort of why I chose to do this sentiment this way. And it also fills the space nicely. So you can see how the bottom of the S is going to overlap my sewing machine. Now I'm pulling out the other small sentiment pieces that go with this and stamping those just directly onto the pattern paper so that my sentiment says, "You're so thoughtful." Now I can start to decorate my little floating shelves. So I've got that jar of buttons, and I thought it'd be really cute if this little mouse with the thimble on his head, which I just think is adorable, is sitting on top of the jar. He's just kind of hanging out watching everything that's going on. And then I've got this little guy, and I like to put things in his hand that's up in the air. So I'll put a little button in his hand here just in a little bit. Had a little drip of glue there, so let me fix that. And then I'm putting this spool of ribbon where the ribbon's overhanging the edge of the shelf. Now for my other shelf, my big item on that shelf is going to be this tomato pincushion. And then of course I have my other little mouse that is up there working up on that shelf as well. And I'm adding all of these with foam squares so they're popped up just like the shelves that they're sitting on. I also have these little spools of thread, and I think that they're fun to stack. I like stacking them to where one is kind of set off to the side from one because that makes them a little less perfect and a little more believable. There I am adding that button to his hand. Since he's near the jar of buttons, I just thought that was the perfect little item to add into his hand. And then this bigger button is from the Sewn with Love set as well. And I'm just trying to figure out kind of where I want it because I'm just have a bunch of buttons that I'm going to sprinkle around. We all know our craft room is just a mess when we're working with all these fun things sitting around. So I've added that final button, and then I decided there's a little tiny heart in this set, and I thought it would be fun to stamp that around a little bit, sort of as my embellishment. Instead of putting buttons or sequins, I'm just going to stamp this little heart directly onto the background and kind of fill in a little bit. And then, of course, nothing is complete without a little bit of glitter. So I'm just adding some glitter accents to the buttons and the thimbles, a little bit on the sewing machine, just here and there, so that there are little touches of glitter that catch the light and catch your eye. I also added some to those little hearts that I stamped earlier and the top of the pin cushion. And then here is my finished card with those So Very Mice and the Sewn with Love set, and I really love how I can combine these two and make a super cute card. So I've already taken my So Very Mice images, stamped them, colored them, and cut them out with the coordinating dies, and I'm just going to set those aside. Then I am pulling out my pattern paper for this card, and I'll be using the What's Sewing On paper pack. I've got this yellow piece that's going to be in the center of my card inside of a frame. And then I'm going to pull out the stripes and sprinkles. I really like mixing these two paper collections together. They work really well together. I've pulled out my stitched rectangle. This is the largest stitched rectangle stackable. And I've also pulled out this scalloped rectangle frame. And I've cut that from some apricot cardstock. Now I'm just using my ruler to measure to find out how wide I need to cut the yellow paper to fit behind the frame. So I'm cutting it at 2 7/8. That's the short direction, and then I'll use my ruler to measure in the other direction, and I'll be cutting that at 4 1/8. The lawnfawn ruler is really handy in figuring out those little measurements so that you get this piece of paper cut just right to fit behind the frame. So this will fit behind my frame, and I'll have a little bit of a lip to glue it to on the back side. And then I'm using that stitched rectangle to cut out the green piece of paper. This will give me that nice stitched edge. Now I'm pulling out an older product. This is the Embroidered Hello, and I think that this works perfectly with these new little mice that are sewing. So I've cut that out of the center of my paper that goes in the frame. And then now I'm going to go ahead and glue that frame onto my yellow piece of paper. So my sentiment is going to be this stitched embroidered hello in the center of the frame. There is also an embroidered thanks if you want it to say thanks. Now I need to stitch my sentiment, and for this one I'm just pulling out this pink thread here. This happens to be some DMC Cotton Pearl number 5, but you can use any DMC embroidery thread or any kind of other embroidery thread that you have. And then I've pulled out a needle. This one's got a nice big eye on it, but it's not too big. It will still fit through those holes really easily. I'm going to thread my needle, and the way I like to start my thread on something like this, where I've got a lot of paper and border around it, the easiest way to start it is to just hold that little tail down with a piece of washi tape. Now this is some really pretty new washi tape. I love this rainbow stripe washi tape so much, but no one is going to see your tape, so you don't need to worry about what it looks like. I've started my thread through that first hole, then I'm just going to thread it through the next hole, and you can see how the word is kind of spelled out. Now this is not the right hole. And if you have trouble, you can draw it in lightly with a pencil line. But there is a diagram on the packaging showing you how this should look. And for each of these, I'm just going to the next hole and pulling through. And I'm just going to work my way around the hello until I get the whole thing stitched. Making sure these are pulled not too tight, but they're pulled nice and snug so that I don't have any loops kind of loose. It'll give you a really nice sharp look. Stitching your sentiment like this does take a little extra time, but I think it is a really fun handmade look and your recipient will really appreciate it. You could always cut a bunch of these and stitch them up while you watch TV. I know that's when I like to do my stitching. So now I'm getting to the end over here to my little O, and once I get that last stitch through, I'm going to do the same as I did at the beginning and just hold that in place with a little piece of tape. So this is the nice thing that is very convenient when you have a big panel like this, that you can just tape those down, trim off the ends, and not worry about your tails. So there is that embroidered hello that I think looks really nice. And now I can start to assemble my card. So I'm putting that polka dot green piece that I cut with the stitch rectangle onto my card base. And then for that embroidered hello in the frame, I am going to pop that up with some foam. And I like to do this because that thread on the back creates some bulk to it. So if you put some foam on the back, it kind of lifts it up and you get everything nice and even and there's no hump in the middle. Now before I do that, I am adding this little mouse. I want him to look like he's popping out from behind the frame and his needle lines up with the end of the O, like he stitched this. So I'm just trimming him off. I drew a pencil line where I needed to trim him off so that I can butt the bottom of him right up against the frame, and it looks like he's kind of popping out from the frame from above. And then my thread that's in the needle lines up perfectly with the end of the O. So you can see I've put some foam tape all over the back, just as I was saying before. I've not put any over the threads, so I've kind of gone in between the threads. And then I'm just going to pop that onto my card back, and you can see that I get that nice dimension where that is popped up. Now to add all my little images, I'm going to pop some of these up on foam as well, so I have a lot of dimension on this card. And I'm starting with my bigger pieces in the corners. So I've got that little mouse that's stitching on that hoop. And I love this cute little dress form. And I'm going to put that in the right-hand corner. Just adding some really small pieces to the base of it. Then of course I have my favorite little mouse that's just sitting around kind of goofy with the thimble on his head. And I'm using some thin foam squares for him so he is not popped up quite as much as the dress form, and I can kind of tuck him under a little bit and get his tail up underneath that dress form. And now I'm just going to take all these little crafty things and sort of scatter them around this frame. So I have that cute little pair of scissors. I stamped and colored quite a few of the little spools of thread, and I'm just kind of putting them around like they've been tossed onto this frame. And then of course, it's always fun to spread some buttons around. I do have this little spool of ribbon. I'm going to add that up in that top right corner here in a little bit. I'm just laying my buttons out to kind of figure out where I want them to be. I really like these tiny buttons. I think they're fun to kind of scatter around just like embellishments. So once I figure out where those buttons are going to go, I'm just going to pick them up, add a little dot of glue, and drop them back down. I really like how they're kind of overlapping the edge of the frame, kind of like they just tossed onto this card, which I think is really cute. And then I'll add that little spool of ribbon right above the little mouse that's popping out of the frame, just right above his head. I'll put a little thin foam square on that as well, so I have some dimension in that corner and they all match really nicely. And then here is my finished card with that embroidered hello. I think that is a really fun product to add to this So Very Mice stamp set.
Oh my goodness, Shari, I am just in love with how you added that embroidered hello to the card. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And then adding this with Sewn with Love, oh my gosh, the little shelves, I just love it. And next up, we have some incredible cards by the design team. And first up, we have this beautiful shutter card by Megan. So as you open up the card, you get this big reveal on the inside of your sentiment and also the cutest little sewing scene. I love this card so much. This card by Anea is just beautiful. She used our double stitched circles in the background, which look perfect with these cute little mice, and I love those rainbows. And then this card by Elise is so sweet, and I love how she used our little photo frames there as nice frames for her scenes. These embroidery hoops by Tammy blew me away when I saw them. They are so gorgeous. They're like their own little gift and decor all in one, and they're like sweet little shadow boxes. I am just in love with these. This card by Shari blows me away, and it uses a brand new product we'll be introducing later, which is our embroidery hoop die, and I just love it. And these little tags by Kara are so sweet. I love how she colored that dress. I wish those dresses were real dresses in real life, right? This card by Elena is so sweet, and I love her custom sentiment with her die-cut letters so much. This is a beautiful birthday card with Audrey, and I love that you could do this for birthday, thank you, anything that you could think of. This card by Grace is so stunning and also features that new embroidery hoop, and I love how she added those curtains. And then here's the card by Callie that inspired me to make mine today. So pretty and so sweet. This card by Maureen is gorgeous. I love the pink and orange, and she used a brand new stamp set called How You Bean Buttons on this card. And then this beautiful quilted backdrop on Letitia's card is a perfect match for So Very Mice. So we cannot wait to see what you guys create with this stamp set, so make sure to share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!